Well, if you notice, I have a brand new podium up here and a card. Congratulations, you made it a whole year. Guess who? Now, I can't imagine who would have the talent to do this, but I appreciate it. Thank you very much. I'm going to keep the card in my office, too.
Has it got a coffee maker with it?
Yeah.
No, I looked for a secret compartment with, with $1,000 in it or something. I couldn't find one, but... Yeah. Mark chapter 4. We're finishing up Mark chapter 4 this morning. And unless you have ever been in a boat in a truly dangerous storm, you can't really comprehend what the disciples went through in today's text. Begin in verse 35. Mark 4 and verse 35. On that day, when evening had come, he said to them, "Let us go across to the other side." And leaving the crowd, they took him with them in the boat, just as he was. And other boats were with him. And a great windstorm arose, and the waves were breaking into the boat, so that the boat was already filling. But he was in the stern, asleep on the cushion. And they woke him and said to him, "Teacher, do you not care that we are perishing?" And he awoke and rebuked the wind and said to the sea, "Peace, be still." And the wind ceased, and there was a great calm. He said to them, "Why are you so afraid? Have you still no faith?" They were filled with great fear and said to one another, "Who then is this, that even the wind and the sea obey him?" You ever been in a storm where you were afraid? I think we all have. They're kind of scary. Karina and I were on a cruise a year or two ago, and you book that months ahead of time, maybe even a year ahead of time. We had no idea there'd be a hurricane blowing in right that same week. And you can't cancel. I mean, you can, but, well, that's like throwing money right out the window. And so we go, and thankfully, the ship is big enough. If you're inside, you really can't tell there's even a hurricane out there. But if you go out on the deck and you stand there and watch, oh boy, the wave, some of the biggest waves you've ever seen in your life, and it's scary looking out there. That's not even a little bit close to as bad as the storm the disciples experienced in this text. Now, if those of you in the geography class on Wednesday nights, we've covered this storm. So we're not going to talk about the storm nearly as much tonight. But Mark has a specific purpose for telling this story. I want to know what it is. Why did he tell us this story? That's what we're after in this class. Maybe no other scripture really speaks to us on a personal level as this one. Because we all go through storms. Literally or figuratively. We all go through storms. So let's first exegete the text, and then we'll look at the personal application. So we're in verses 35 and 36 to start off with. On that day when evening came, Jesus said to his disciples, "Let's go across to the other side of the lake." So after leaving the crowd, they took him along just as he was in the boat, and other boats were with him. What do we know from that text?
Sea of Galilee.
Sea of Galilee. All right, what else?
More than one. More than one boat.
More than one boat. He's in a boat, and there are other boats with him. What else?
He didn't make any preparation to leave.
He didn't make any preparation to leave. He left. They took him just as he was. We'll talk about that momentarily. What else? It's evening. What's he been doing all day? Preaching.
Probably nothing.
Yeah, just laying around. No, it was a busy, busy day. Preaching, teaching, healing, and he's been going at it hard all day long, and evening has come. It's a needed retreat. Obviously, he is tired because he has fallen asleep. It's a huge storm, and he's just snoozing away because he's so tired, literally worn out. Several clues from this chapter and in chapter 3 tell us Jesus' ministry was extremely demanding. He was literally giving his life. Just dealing with the crowds who followed him everywhere he went. Being met with an unending line of those that needed healing. And not just those that needed healing. And keep in mind, these are people with leprosy and people with all kinds of diseases and people with demons inside them. And can you imagine how taxing that would be on your emotions? He was very human. And all this would have left Jesus in a state of exhaustion. Now, just the act of preaching, just that, not the healing, not the the exorcising of demons and all the other things he did, not counting that, just the preaching and teaching can we talked about this, was it Wednesday night or maybe last week? Teachers, you go through it, public speaking just wears you out, doesn't it? It literally drains calcium from your bones. It's just bone weary. Some have compared it to playing a football game. An entire football game. How tired a football player is after playing a whole game. I've heard preachers say, I'm just exhausted. I just can't do anything afterwards. Some have compared it to about the same as a half day of gardening and yard work. It just takes it out of you. It's mentally and emotionally taxing in a way that's really hard to explain. I know that about 15 minutes after Sunday lunch, don't count on me to do anything. My body shuts down. I can kind of sort of watch football with one eye half open. It says, let us cross. Let's go across to the other side of the lake. The Greek tense carries with it a sense of urgency. Jesus makes a decision, I've got to get out of here. I can't do this anymore. I'm at the point of shutting down. I have to go. It's more like, okay, let's go. I got to get out of here. Let's vamoose. Sure, he didn't say it that way, but he could have. Maybe he was so tired, he's at the end of his rope, physically speaking. He knows he can't continue without some rest. And verse 36 says that when the disciples had left the multitude, they took Jesus with them. How? Just as he was. The same way the song invites us after the sermon to go down to the front. Just as I am. They took Jesus just as he was. It's a curious phrase. It simply means Jesus is so tired, he didn't make any advanced preparation. There aren't provisions. There's no change of clothing. Nothing matters. I have to get some rest. That's all that matters right now. I need rest. He had to take a break, or he's going to physically break down. He's at the point of exhaustion. We would see him like that another time. When was it? In the Garden of Gethsemane, where it says that he perspired blood. Just the point of absolute anxiety and exhaustion. And note the end of verse 36 says, other little boats were also with him. This is the NIV up here, I think. It just says other boats. The ESV just said other boats, but there is the description in the original. There were little boats with him. even on an escape to rest, I believe it's telling us some people grabbed other boats and followed him. That's how I see that. He can't escape. He just can't get away. Now, before we criticize them for not giving Jesus at least some respite from people, remember that allowing others to come along serves a practical purpose in this story. What purpose would they serve? Witnesses. Eyewitnesses. Jesus knows that a storm is coming, and he knows what he's going to have to do, and they're witnesses.
Didn't we talk about how storms can come up at any time?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. And we'll get into it in just a moment. Not nearly as much detail as on Wednesday night, but Jesus knows it's coming. He knows what he's going to do. Now, we don't know how many people came along, but in 1986, the hull of a fishing boat from New Testament times was recovered from the mud on the northeast shore of Galilee. My Bible has a picture of it somewhere in here. You can Google it. It could hold about 15 people. And Mark doesn't tell us how many boats are there, and he describes them as little boats. So let's say 10 people. And let's say 3, 4 or 5 boats. How many witnesses do we have? 30, 40, 50, plus the 12. That's a pretty good amount of witnesses to have with you out in the middle of the sea in this storm. They're going to witness some unbelievable events about to unfold. It's another case of incredible verification in the life of Jesus through eyewitness accounts. Besides the apostles themselves, several of the biblical writers will just sneak in there. Oh, and by the way, there are witnesses to this. Don't just take my word for it. Verses 37 and 38. And a great windstorm arose, and the waves were breaking into the boat, so that the boat was already filling. But he was in the stern, asleep on the cushion. And they woke him and said to him, Teacher, do you not care that we are perishing? Now what have we learned?
You said that to Saul.
They have
I
little
think you
faith.
need to raise your voice a little bit.
Okay, which part?
Teacher.
Teacher, don't you care they're
Teacher, don't you care that we're perishing? Great fear. They are literally afraid for their lives. What else have we learned?
Little faith.
They have little faith. Or he's asking them, he's getting on to them about their small faith. What else?
Ship was about to go down.
The ship is about to go down. It's filling up. The word Mark chose for storm in the Greek can also be interpreted as hurricane. It can also be interpreted as earthquake. It just means some natural, disastrous event. It's a kind of a storm that's much worse than your average run-of-the-mill storm. So we're not talking about just one of your storms that they've encountered many, many times out on the sea. This one is altogether different. This is a natural disaster, if you will. And extreme storms are not unknown to the Sea of Galilee. It's surrounded by high mountains. It sits down in a basin. Violent winds enter that basin from the southeast like a funnel, right off the Mediterranean Sea. And they create a situation in which violent storms can materialize very, very suddenly. And notice it's very crystal clear. It's not a rainstorm. What kind of storm is it? Wind. Rain is not mentioned at all. it says the wind came up and stirred up the waves, and it was a windstorm. And you know, when we think of a storm, we think the dark clouds and the thunder and lightning and rain. That's not this kind of storm. Heavy, heavy, heavy winds, like over in Iowa not too long ago. Maybe you've been through some of those violent winds. Storms in the evening as this one were especially dangerous. And in fact, you see the severity of the storm by the fact that they are terrified. Even though they're experienced fishermen, several of them are, they are terrified. They've weathered storms before, and they know a bad one when they see it. And this is a bad one. Mark says the waves broke over into the boat. Matthew and Luke are a little bit more clear, a little more vivid. Matthew says the ship was covered with waves. Matthew 8:24. Luke says they were filled with water and were in jeopardy. Luke 8:23. It's going down. They know this ship is going to sink. In all three Gospels, the disciples tell Jesus, "We're about to perish. Don't you care? Here you are sound asleep. We're going down. This ship is going down. There's nothing we can do." All the while, Jesus is just sound asleep. He's on a cushion in the stern, the rear of the boat. By the way, the only place we hear of Jesus sleeping, right here. And it's in the middle of a storm. It's the only time you read about Jesus asleep. How can he sleep through a tempest? How can he sleep in the storm? Well, I'll tell you how. You tell me how. He's Jesus. That's one thing. What else?
Exhausted.
He's exhausted. What else?
He's not worried.
He's not worried.
Couldn't have this lesson if he wasn't asleep.
That's a good point.
Yeah. I remember in high school, 1984, 1985, one of those. I think it was maybe the summer between the two. Between my junior and senior year in high school, to date me. I was home by myself. I don't remember where my mom and dad were, my brother. They probably went on vacation and I stayed home. You know how middle kids, just left out, forgotten. I don't remember. I was at home. I probably begged to stay home, actually. But I was asleep on the couch in the living room, and a hurricane, I can't remember which one, comes in, and this was in Liberty, Texas, near between Beaumont and Houston. And the back porch of the house, 15 feet away from me, blows off the house. I slept right through it, didn't even know. Maybe I'd stayed up all night and was just exhausted. I don't remember. All the details are gone. Don't take that too far, because I was a good kid. I was an angel. Just ask my mom. If you're tired enough, you can sleep through about anything. Do you ever take your kids somewhere and it was out of their ordinary and they were just exhausted and they slept through a concert, or they slept through a ball game and the crowd cheering with noise and all that stuff? If you're tired enough, you can sleep through just about anything. And this passage, incidentally, is a fascinating insight into the incarnation. R. Kent Hughes puts it this way: though in a moment Jesus would calm the storm with an extraordinary display of power, he first slept in a weary body. Just don't let it escape you that he's tired, he's exhausted. He says, in this grand display, the opposites of weakness and omnipotence do not clash. Rather, they coalesce in a beautiful harmony, too magnificent to be the product of human imagination. Only God would put it this way. Verse 38, they woke him. He didn't wake up because it was storming. They woke him up. How do you suppose you wake up the Son of God?
Master!
Like poking a bear? No, it wouldn't be that way. But they are afraid and they shake him, or whatever they have to do. They wake him up. And they said, Teacher, do you not care that we're perishing? They're experienced fishermen. And if you've been in that class on geography and we looked at these boats and how strong of men these had to be, these are men's men. And they are terrified. They've come to the end of their human ability. So what do? Go to the Master. Turn to God for help. Isn't that what we do? We do it as far as we can, and then we turn to Him. Verses 39 and 40. He got up. Notice he didn't need a cup of coffee. He got up, rebuked the wind, and said to the waves, Quiet, be still. And the wind died down and it was completely calm. He said to his disciples, Why are you so afraid? Do you still have no faith? Now what do we know?
You think he was frustrated with them?
I think he was frustrated with them. I think he often got frustrated with them.
Now,
He's still exhausted.
has he talked about, I mean, I think he knew at this time he had to die on the cross, but does the disciples, they probably don't know.
They don't get it. They still don't get it. Obviously, they still don't fully understand who he is. Cece.
The question is, why are you so afraid? It wasn't, I don't think Jesus was giving any insinuation if you don't do something that causes a storm. But don't be afraid because of the storm.
Yeah.
And I think because of being afraid, he associated that with a lack of faith. And I think those are the lessons that really should permeate.
Right. We'll talk about that in just a minute. He stands up and he rebukes the wind. What does that mean, rebuke? He gets after it. He gets onto it like a parent to a child. It literally means he ordered the wind. He commanded the wind. It's the same Greek word used by Jesus when he commands evil spirits to leave a body. He meant not only to calm the disciples' nerves. I think he was trying to calm, they're reaching a bad place too. And he's trying to calm them down. But he's also going to reveal to them that he has the same command over the forces of nature as he does over the supernatural, over demons. So he commands the wind, he orders the wind to stop. That's side A. Side B, what does he do? He talks to the wind, and then what does he talk to? We're skipping one. The waves. He got up, he rebuked the wind, and he said to the waves, Quiet, or peace. Be still. Be still literally means be muzzled.
Right? If the winds would cease, wouldn't the waves too?
Not immediately, though. I think in this case it means supernaturally quick. Like finger snap. One moment it was the worst windstorm and the biggest waves they've ever seen, and literally the very next second it is like glass.
The waves out of the lake, when you're out on the lake and the wind's blowing, you can be calm all of a sudden, but at the same time you'll get waves because you getting the results of what began.
Mhm.
Otherwise, that don't just stop.
Right. They slosh for a while. But like muzzling the mouth of a ferocious lion, Jesus simply commanded the sea to be muzzled. And immediately, Mark tells us, there was a great calm. It was completely calm. And the idea is instantly. There was no doubt this was a miracle. At the simple command of Jesus, the wind stopped. If it was raining, the rain stopped. All fear of perishing immediately stopped, at least from the storm. And then Jesus comes back to his Kodak moment, his teachable moment. And he asked them, "Why are you so afraid?" From a human standpoint, that's a dumb question. But it's not coming from a human standpoint, is it? It's coming from the Son of God himself. But why ask that question? I mean, wouldn't you be afraid if you're in a storm like that and your ship is going down? And who wouldn't be afraid? Well, Jesus. Who else? Probably nobody. If you believed in him and who he was, you wouldn't have been afraid. I think it's just telling us they still haven't got it yet. They don't get it. They don't know. But I'm going to tell you, I'd be afraid. He asked them, "Why are you so afraid? Why do you have such little faith?" And that's really the key right there. They have seen Jesus do so much. They've experienced his power time and time again throughout his ministry. I mean, it's still early in his ministry, but they've seen enough. When the rubber meets the road, they're not there yet. And they won't be. Even at the crucifixion, they won't be there yet. They'll show their little faith even then. They were insiders to his ministry, and they don't fully understand who he is. And they can't. Not until the resurrection. That's the capstone. That's the one thing that will prove to them. Oh, it will all coalesce with the help of the Holy Spirit. It will all come together, but they're not there yet. And notice, Jesus doesn't get on to them because they don't understand. That's not what he's rebuking them for. It's not their lack of understanding that he gets on to them. What does he get on to them for? The lack of trust, the lack of faith, the fact that they are afraid, the fear.
And that's palpable. You don't even have to say anything.
Yeah, yeah. You don't have to say it. You'll show it just fine, Cecil.
Two aspects to it. I see one from Christ and one from them. One of it is Jesus knew what his calling was. So therefore, he knew this wasn't going to be the end. But at the same time, the disciples, this lesson, this beginning lesson of Jesus, they hadn't got it yet. If they were on the ship with Jesus, it was going to go somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
They hadn't really got the idea of where it's going. It was sort of like, is this the end? So I think if we know where our destination is, anything in between shouldn't make us so fearful.
Yeah.
And they hadn't picked up on where the destination was.
Okay. The real threat to faith is not lack of knowledge. That's not a threat to faith. The threat to faith is when you think you've got it all. You don't have to grow anymore. You don't have to learn anymore. That's the threat to faith. The threat to faith is not that they don't understand it all, that they don't get it yet. That's not it. It's fear. In this case, it's fear.
More specifically, it's the fear of dying.
The fear of dying, yeah.
They probably weren't thinking, well, is Christ going to die today too?
Yeah.
That's how he ends.
I think I read somewhere or someplace spoke that is considered an abyss under the sea out there, and that has its own threatening stories. Besides that, and then you compound that with the fear of being in the abyss.
Yeah. Which is lack of understanding too. But he's not getting on to them about that. Faith and fear cancel each other out. Faith and fear cancel each other out. If you have fear, you don't have faith. If you have faith, you don't have fear. They are terrified. And his question is, why do you have such little faith? Their terror is evidence of their lack of trust. Verse 41. They were terrified and asked each other, "Who is this? Even the wind and the waves obey him." Now what do we know? They're still afraid. The sea is perfectly calm, like glass, and it even used a deeper. This is a much greater word for fear and terror than when they were in the storm. Notice verse 40. Why are you so afraid? They're just afraid in the storm. They're terrified after he calms the storm. Ironically, the terror of the disciples at what Jesus has just done exceeds the initial fear of the storm. They're filled with great fear, the descriptive is added. Now, it was just fear. Now it's great fear. The Greek word Mark chose for fear is a cowardly fear. They are literally terrified by this person who is with them in the boat, who has just rebuked the winds and spoke to the waves, and they both obeyed. They are shocked at what Jesus has just done. And they have the reaction that causes them to realize we are in the presence of deity. And what happens when you're in God's presence? You cannot see God and live. That's why they're terrified. They're getting it in small doses, but they're getting it. And as amazing as Jesus' teachings and healings and demon exorcisms have been, they have vastly underestimated his authority. They have vastly underestimated who he really is and the kind of power that he has. They've seen 100 miracles or more, and all of those pale in significance to this one.
They just called him, when they woke him up, they called him Jesus. They didn't call him Messiah, they didn't call him God, they didn't give him any other teaching.
Yeah, Rabbi. Now they're not calling him Rabbi. Jesus has displayed before them a whole new level of authority, a whole new level of power, and suddenly they realize Jesus of Nazareth, their wise teacher, their wonderful friend, is as far removed from them as the remotest star. He is just not like them at all. Now the question is, why did Jesus perform this miracle?
And the Old Testament Psalm, or I guess one David wrote in 64 and 107, he mentioned, "He maketh the storm a calm, so that the waves thereof are still." So in the Old Testament, only God David mentions only God can have
Only
this.
God can do this. They're realizing that.
He stilled the waves of the sea and the noise of the waves and the tumult of the people.
Why is this so important that Matthew, Mark, and Luke each tell the story?
So, one aspect is told from the Jewish aspect of it, the other from the Gentile aspect of
Okay?
it. The world.
It's for everybody.
Basically, a turning point.
A turning point. They're getting it. There is no doubt who this is. The other miracles, others have attempted, fake messiahs, fake those who, like Simon the sorcerer in the book of Acts, those who were really gifted at tricking people. The others, you always maybe have that in the back of your mind. Yeah, but there is no way to trick this. And he wants them and he wants us and everybody, they want everybody to ask the same question. Verse 41. Who is this? Even the wind and the waves obey him. That question was very real to them. They want to know, who is he? But it's a rhetorical question. Because what's the only answer? He is the Christ, the Messiah, the Son of God. He is deity. He is God himself, incarnate in the flesh. The calming of the wind and the sea wasn't just a demonstration of power, it's an epiphany. Jesus is layer by layer taking the veil off. And they're seeing more clearly who he is. And right now, there is no doubt. None whatsoever.
And yet they're still afraid.
And they're still afraid.
One of these eyewitnesses later on was like, that which we have seen, that which we have held, that which we have tasted or touched. And then later in the same book, John would write, perfect love casts out fear.
Perfect love would cast it out.
It's not the imperfect love of Jesus here that is at fault.
Right.
It is their imperfect love for him
Yes.
at this point.
Yes.
So I'm not arguing that they're not getting a bigger picture, but they still don't have a picture.
No, they don't.
Or they wouldn't be afraid.
Right. It's still not clear. It's just another layer. It's another step in that direction.
Well, that's the point right there. These people are still early in the ministry of Jesus. And Jesus is teaching them in increments that they can learn and understand. And I believe this is just one of those lessons that are following that line to get to the end,
Yes.
where they finally realize who he really is.
Yes.
And all this stuff they're going through backs up when they finally realize it. All this stuff comes to play. Comes to mind.
Everybody's got 20/20 hindsight. Like,
Right.
That's how I feel.
Yeah, and it would all come together later as they look back on all of these events and teachings and stories and all these happenings. And they would say, now we get it. But they don't have it yet. It's getting there. It's working. But keep in mind, anytime you're reading something, keep in mind the intent of the author. Why is Mark telling us this story? We'll go back to Mark chapter 1 and verse 1. The beginning of the gospel of Jesus Christ, the Son of God. He tells us right off the bat, first sentence, I want to tell you the story, the good news of Jesus Christ, that he is the Son of God. That's why he writes this book. And so this is just another story to say, look, this is what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to convince you, and keep in mind, Mark has a very broad audience, both Jew and Gentile. And he's trying to tell them, convince the Jews, yes, it was Jesus, and convince the Gentiles, it's absolutely Jesus. He's the Son of God. And when we read it, that's the message we are supposed to get. But we certainly get it in this story. He is God in the flesh, on this earth. But there's another unmistakable value in this story for our lives personally. It's an application that goes all the way back to the early days of the church. And that's where I want to park for a few minutes. We only have a couple of minutes left. This passage is a beautiful picture of believers when they go through trials, when they go through tribulations, when they go through storms. We think about this perspective of the story and notice just a couple of things if time permits. When you go through the storm, number one, when Jesus gets on our boat of life, it doesn't exempt us from the storms. You know, you think about it, you would think, well, if Jesus is on the boat, surely there shouldn't be a storm, and surely it shouldn't sink the boat, and surely, that shouldn't happen. But it does. So as you follow the Lord, you find that the Lord sometimes allows you to experience testing to mold you, to shape you, to mature you, to fit you into His service better. They needed to go through this, didn't they? This is an important step in their maturity. So when you enter a storm in your life, we naturally recoil from it. We don't want to go through it. We don't like it. Who in their right mind wants to go through a storm? Experience the pain and the suffering and any difficult trial in your life. We don't want to do that. But sometimes the trials, sometimes they're the result of our own mistakes, right? We make poor choices, we go through a storm. We're reaping what we've sown. And sometimes they come because God is disciplining us because of sin or because of whatever reason. We're going through a disciplinary process. The truth is, often our storms have nothing to do with reaping what we sow or discipline. It's the fact that we're on the same boat as Jesus. All right, time is up. I'll stop there. Thank you for coming to class. We move on to chapter 5, the healing of a man with a demon, next week. Give the book of Mark another read, would you, this week? It's short. You can do it. It didn't take but a few minutes. Give it another read through. Final thoughts?
I'd like to say one thing. In Hebrews it says it's a fearful thing to fall in the hands of the living God.
Yes.
That's what these guys have done.
Yes.
They left the faith, and they were in his sin, and they were terrified.
Yes, absolutely.
I just keep thinking that the men that are there and such, they were human. And so it's, when this realization snapped, it's kind of, expecting a lot, because they're still thinking with the human thoughts.
Mm-hmm.
It would take me a while to, it would take me a while to regulate, what's going on.
Yes.
So when he says, don't you give it up, I'm still in the process of trying to place it.
Yes. They are human. We are human. We're in the human experience together. And He's with us. Thank you for being here. We will dismiss, take a break for a few moments, gather in the auditorium for our worship service.